I want to ask you a very honest question. Have you ever had a moment like this in your life? You stopped right in the middle of a situation and felt something inside you say, "I've been here before, a different time, a different person, a different place," but that feeling, exactly the same sense of being stuck, the same heavy, bitter taste of disappointment, the same question, how did I end up here again? And maybe the most unsettling part is this: last time, you swore it wouldn't happen again. This time would be different. You would be more careful, you would make better choices. And yet, here you are. This doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you're incapable of learning. But explaining it only as bad luck or poor timing doesn't seem enough anymore. Carl Jung spent his life examining why people repeat the same mistakes. And the answer he gave is both disturbing and deeply liberating. Repeated mistakes are not bad luck. They are a cycle. And this cycle, whether you are aware of it or not, is entirely driven from within you. Today, we are going to explore this cycle together, where it comes from, how it works, and most importantly, what it really means to break it. Asterisk 1. Unconscious cycles automatically control you. Think about yourself. What do you do when you wake up in the morning? You probably grab your phone and check it. You pour your coffee. Maybe you go to work the same way. Maybe you listen to the same music. How many of these do you think are truly conscious choices? Most people believe they make highly conscious decisions, but research in neuroscience and psychology presents a different picture. The majority of our daily behaviors are governed by automatic patterns, habits, reflexes, responses learned in the past. And this is where what Jung says becomes very important. Not only small daily habits, but also the major decisions in our lives are largely influenced by unconscious patterns. Who we are drawn to, which relationships we choose, which opportunities we avoid, how we react under pressure, how we handle conflict. All of these are products of patterns that have settled into our minds over the years. So let's ask, where do these patterns come from? From childhood, from past relationships, from repeated experiences. When the mind experiences something often enough, it codes it as a norm, and once it becomes a norm, it starts repeating it automatically. That's why sometimes you tell yourself, why am I drawn to the same type of person again? Why did I end up in the same situation again? Why did I make the same decision again, even though it looks different this time? Because your mind repeats what is familiar, even if you consciously know it's bad. Asterisk 2. You cannot change what you do not notice. Now let me ask you this, is there something in your life that keeps repeating? Maybe in relationships, maybe in your career, maybe in the promises you make to yourself. If you've noticed it, you've probably also noticed this. We usually attribute these repetitions to external factors, the wrong people, bad timing, unfavorable conditions, as if life is conspiring against us, making us experience the same thing over and over again. But for a moment, think about this. What is the common element in all these different stories? Yes, you guessed it right. It's you. This is not an accusation. On the contrary, it is a very powerful realization. Because if the problem were entirely outside of you, it would be impossible to change. But if there is a pattern within you, you can change it. Jung says this: everything that is unconscious is experienced as fate. In other words, if you cannot see the pattern operating within you, you experience it as something coming from the outside, like destiny, as if life is doing this to you. But in reality, you are contributing to it without realizing it. Do you know why awareness is so important? Because the first step of change is to see what needs to be changed. You cannot break a cycle if you are not aware that you are inside it. Think of it like this. You keep bumping into the same table in a dark room. The problem is not the table, it's the absence of light. When you turn on the light, you see the table, and you can walk around it. Awareness is that light. 3. The mind chooses what is familiar, not what is right. Now I want to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. You are not a rational being, at least, not as much as you think. Yes, you can make logical decisions. Yes, you can analyze, evaluate, weigh your options. But when it comes to major decisions that affect your heart, your mind usually acts before logic. And the mind's primary criterion is this: is it familiar? There is a very interesting psychological truth here. The human brain creates a strong connection between familiarity and safety. So something that feels familiar comes with a sense of safety, regardless of whether it is actually good or not. That's why something very strange can happen. Even a dynamic that harms you can feel safe if you have experienced it enough in the past. And something that could truly make you happy may feel dangerous simply because it is unfamiliar. Think about it. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, your mind may have equated love with conditions. So when someone begins to love you unconditionally, it feels strange. It may feel like something is wrong. But someone who is cold to you, who withdraws their attention, feels familiar. Not right, but familiar. And this familiarity brings you back to the same place again. The mind choosing what is familiar rather than what is right is one of the core mechanisms of these cycles. And to break it, you first need to understand what you are choosing simply because it is familiar. For the past tries to repeat itself through the present. One of Jung's most important observations is this: unresolved experiences repeat themselves until they are resolved. You can think of it like this. The mind does not know what to do with unfinished stories. When it cannot fully process an experience, cannot make sense of it, or cannot move on from it, it tries to recreate that experience in some way, with different people, in different times and places, but with the same emotional structure. That's why some mistakes may not feel new to you, because they are not. They are an old story wearing a new costume, a different face, but the same feeling. Let me give you an example. Let's say as a child, you constantly tried to earn a parent's attention and approval, and no matter how much you tried, you never felt good enough. This experience remained unresolved. Your mind wanted to complete that story, and in adulthood, without realizing it, you were drawn to people who do not approve of you. Maybe a boss, maybe a partner, and the same cycle begins again, trying to prove your worth, not being enough again. The same feeling again. This is not a coincidence. This is the mind's attempt to complete an unresolved story. But what if this time you got a different result? What if you finally received that approval? That may not be the solution either, because the problem is not gaining approval, but understanding where and how your deep need for approval originated. The cycle is not broken by changing the story outside. It is broken by understanding the need inside. 5. Breaking the cycle begins with understanding yourself. What we've talked about so far may feel a bit overwhelming. Unconscious patterns, repetitions of the past, automatic choices. It can feel as if everything is predetermined, but that is not the real message. The reason Jung examined the unconscious so deeply was not to show its power, but to make it visible, because what is visible can be changed. Breaking the cycle is not about trying harder, but about becoming more aware. So how does that happen? The first step is to observe patterns. The next time a familiar feeling arises, pause. Just for a moment, pause and ask, what does this feeling remind me of? When have I felt this before? Which pattern is being activated here? Asking these questions will not automatically stop the pattern, but it brings it out of the darkness of the unconscious. And a pattern that you consciously observe can no longer operate with the same power. The second step is to understand your reactions. Question why you reacted the way you did in a situation. See what leads to your anger, your withdrawal, your silence, or your over-explaining. Reactions are not random. Every reaction has a past. And when you see that past, you can begin to choose your response instead of reacting automatically. The third step, and the hardest one, learning to stay with what is unfamiliar. We talked about how the familiar feels safe. That means when you break the cycle, at first it will feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. A healthy relationship may feel strange. A peaceful environment may feel empty. A healthy choice may seem wrong. This feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that change has begun, and learning to tolerate it is the most critical part of breaking the cycle. Jung calls this process individuation, the journey of knowing yourself. And I should tell you, this journey is neither fast nor easy, nor something you do once and finish. It is a process that progresses every day through small awarenesses. But I can say this: every real awareness weakens the cycle a little. Every conscious choice weakens the automatic pattern, and over time, you begin to truly feel that you are no longer forced to rewrite the same story again. Today, we have come to a very important point together. We looked at how unconscious cycles work. We talked about why awareness is the first condition for change. We understood why the mind chooses what is familiar instead of what is right. We saw how unresolved experiences from the past try to recreate the present, and we explored what it really means to break the cycle. But now, I want to tell you the most important thing. The fact that you have made the same mistakes does not define you. Being inside these cycles does not determine who you are. These are simply traces of experiences that have not yet been fully seen, understood, or processed. And the good news is this: a person who sees the cycles does not have to remain inside them. Jung said this: everything that is unconscious is experienced as fate, but everything that becomes conscious is no longer fate. It becomes a choice, so you do not have to rewrite the same story again. But to do that, you first need to see which story you keep rewriting. The next time you catch that familiar feeling, pause, just for a moment, just one breath, and ask yourself, is this really different this time? Or am I opening the same page again? Being able to ask that question is the moment the cycle begins to break, because the moment you become aware, the ending of the same story can change. Making the same mistake does not mean you cannot change. It only means there is something you have not yet seen, and now you are beginning to see it.